After taking so many hard decisions that no one around me would take and keep pushing through, I realised I'm not ordinary.
Mihalis, welcome and thank you for being here. Please explain to me how you give language courses without speaking the language.
How do I give language courses without speaking the language?
Or you claim to not speak them.
Well, it depends on the language.
Okay.
Some of them I speak very well. It's just I don't need to. It would be nicer for me to go through that whole process, but everybody wants more language courses, so it'd be nicer for me.
You don't have time to learn
to
how
spend
to speak it properly.
exactly. It would be nicer for me to spend 2 years getting like a native level in a language and blah blah blah. But people want loads of language courses, so
right.
It's much more about. I find it an interesting question in itself, right? Because people find it kind of really absurd what I do, and I get that. But I also find it absurd that people don't get it in the sense of it's my job to teach, not speak the language, right? Yeah. So, you know, in the same way that like I could be a musician and teach the best singers, you know, it doesn't mean I'm going to sing better than the best singers that I'm teaching. And all the famous singers have singing coaches that don't sing as good as them. So it's actually like if we're more focused on what teaching is, it's not so weird that I don't use all the languages that I teach. The thing is I need to know how to teach them, and that's my speciality, is how to put ideas together, how to link concepts, how to reconstruct a panorama. Now there's some practical issues there, of course. I don't want to teach things that are wrong. That's very important. So I use native speakers that like volunteers that I'm poking at all the time to make sure. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm doing constant proofing, which I would say is much better than all of the official grammar books written by natives, because they don't proof what they're saying. They assume they're right because they speak the language, and they tend to be wrong. They tend to make gross simplifications, like any grammar book I open. So I wish my job was as easy as opening a grammar book, taking it all for truth, and reordering it for a course, but it's not. I've actually got to suss out in that grammar book what they've written and described are wrong because of all of their internal negative language transfer from their base language and other languages and the language they're thinking in and writing in and all of that stuff.
So I see like two interesting threads from this. Like one of them is sort of this notion of like those who can't do teach, you know, like which is always a comment about, oh, you couldn't make it in the real world, and so now you're just a teacher, etc. And then there's this other thing which I've been really reflecting on over the last months about like the people who are good at something don't know how to teach it actually. Often the person who's holding
it's
the knowledge.
Rare that you get someone that bridges those two spaces.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing. You know, so I'm not saying one thing or the other that, you know, I'm not for a second saying those who can't do teach, not at all, you know. But a lot of people that learn to do stuff learn from when they're very small, especially in languages and music. So in those two cases specifically, people get vast subconscious knowledge that they have no idea how to pass on. Then, because of economic reasons, they mostly end up becoming teachers to just kind of like pay for their creative lives, you know, not genuinely being interested in teaching. This happens with languages and with music, you know. So I don't know, universities are full of people that are not really interested in teaching the language they're teaching at the university. They're more like interested in their PhD and whatever they're doing, and their teaching is a side hustle. And the same for like performing musicians, you know, whereas it's not that, you know, people are teaching because they can't do. It's actually they don't know how to teach, and they're just doing it as a side hustle.
Right. So, I mean, I think people who really love teaching, or people who are really like master teachers should be the ones who are teaching, ideally, right? I mean, of course we can. But anyway, I really love the way you teach, and it's clear from your courses or the stuff that I've been exposed to that you put out, like you really do love teaching. As you said right now, like you're sort of interested in like how to put things together and this puzzle of the right sequence to get people to understand things. Like,
and I see it as a massive responsibility. So,
right, yeah.
You know, I think love is about love for the world, channeling love for doing things properly, channeling love to raise the bar, channeling love not just to take easy decisions in life. I could take a lot of easy decisions with language transfer that just like celebrate me, you know, and I could have done all of that, but for me love is something else. So I think like love is what will make you face a lot of pain in what you're doing, and they're painful courses to write. Like the level of concentration, the amount of times I need to go through it, the amount of things I need to be holding in my mind at the same time. Where, for example, now I'm writing for Japanese, like I can't even describe like the amount of minds I have working at the same time whilst I'm writing, and how my head overheats and the tension I feel in my body. The only thing that will make me face that is love for what I'm doing, love for learning, love for the world, love for making other people fall in love with life, which is, you know, what some learning has a massive capacity to do.
Well, the world appreciates your pain, or at least the people that have been exposed to you.
So I've heard.
I do anyway. I'll speak for myself.
Thank you.
But so is that basically your principle, or like is there more to like why you're so into teaching, or this way to like how figuring things out, or figuring out how to explain things? Like why are you so attracted to those kind of modalities?
They're the two kind of really different questions. There's two different things there. There's like a code cracking, which is very fun and entertaining, and
of how to learn,
just
how to explain.
no, like a code cracking of truth. So, you know, you can read a grammar book. Exactly. So you can read a truth is what is most coherent. So you can read a grammar book that gives you 100 rules for a language and 100 exceptions. It doesn't look like truth because you need so many rules and so many exceptions. Where if you dig deeper, you find more coherence, and you can find 10 rules that work everywhere. But you need to understand them more profoundly. What is their reason of being? You know, to understand how that's happening. So that for one part is enjoyable and fascinating, and you know, I'm naturally a pattern hunter and a searcher of truth, and not of comfortable thoughts and beliefs, but trying to get closer to truth, which is a moving target in many ways. And then for the other part, it's making people fall in love with the world for many reasons, like, you know, from understanding things about depression and people's spiritual needs, to understanding what makes us so easy to govern so badly, which is our ignorance, how easily manipulable we are.
What makes us easy to govern so badly?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, wouldn't you feel that in the Western world that we're being governed really badly, and it's quite easy to do? Well, in the world generally, I think that in the West what we're seeing is that it's becoming forever more easy to govern us badly. And these are cultural changes and emotional changes and spiritual changes, and I think the more beaten down people are, especially in the UK. But you know, I grew up here, and I remember a country that had a big sense of dignity and personal sovereignty, where people would say, "How dare you?" when power overstepped the mark. That's what keeps a democracy. Not laws, it's an attitude. It's a cultural, political attitude. How dare you? You know? So they're working very, very hard on destroying this attitude to make us easy to govern badly. And one of the things that gives you the strength to not be easy to govern badly, that gives you the strength not to accept beliefs that are just comfortable now and they're not going to work in the long run, but they avoid conflict for now, is love. Love for the world, excitement for the world, passion for the world, feeling of belonging to it and that it belongs to you, that you are responsible for it and to it. This is what makes you harder to govern badly. So I feel my job in language transfer is really similar to, you know, like, I could have gone the other way as well and dedicated my whole life to the violin, which I was like doing before I took like language transfer more seriously. And I would have had the same aim, which would be to share love for the world, fall in love with the world, with music, with language, with culture, with everything, but love. Not everything that steps into pose as love, because there's a lot of that going on in the world as well, and culturally, because love takes a lot of strength, so it's easier to kind of like fake it.
So something I find interesting here is that you went from like the language teaching and also the violin as a way to help people fall in love with not language learning or music, but to fall in love with the world
and life,
right? So
and love itself.
So it's sort of like these things that we do as humans are like mediums for others to just, for other humans to just fall in love with life. Like that's kind of what I'm hearing you say. Like,
yeah, and I mean, like, I can get more political about it and give more fixed examples, right? But like, I'm very critical, as left-wing as I am, or left-leaning as I am in most things in my outlook. I'm extremely critical of the institution of the left, which I feel like has been very usurped by authoritarian people that aren't very left-wing at all. And one of the most perfect examples I can give you is, somebody that might like come down on you, shouting at you for like cultural appropriation because you're like a white person with dreadlocks or something senseless like that. And at the same time they're learning a language and they love language transfer, and it's just like, hello. You can't see. So like maybe somebody would come and tell you that you shouldn't be learning a language because that's cultural appropriation.
Oh,
you see what I'm saying?
Because language is appropriate, yeah.
Right, so there is a whole lot of stuff that's masquerading as love, masquerading as care, masquerading as rights, and it's much more about authoritarianism, and that's highlighted when you think about it critically and you look at the hypocrisy of it. And so I really feel like things like language transfer are really, really important to like push through. I think you need strength to see the contradictions in the little world that you're in, and the world you will get ostracized from the moment you start questioning things, as I have been 100 times from all different spheres for questioning the party line. You need a lot of love and strength for that, and there's only one place that's coming from, and that's love.
Wow. Okay. And do you find, do you feel alone in this? Or
Oh yeah.
Because it's kind of a weird contradiction to be so focused on love and at the same time you feel isolated somehow because...
Well, yeah, like I've done activism since I was a teenager. I'm very well aware of how my little microcosmos has been usurped. It was never popular and cool to be a social justice warrior or whatever these people think they are. And since it did become cool, then all of these contradictions came in where people weren't actually applying these ideas of inclusiveness that they identify so much with. They don't apply it. They actually become authoritarian aggressors. They become policers of speech. They become all of these things that for me are not liberal. And people like me become an absolute minority. And it's easy to spot the minorities because we're not being funded,
Is that it?
Pretty much. And also, like I'm not playing into certain things. For example, I don't know, like I could get a lot of funding if I was to play into anti-colonialism, but then I would have to assume as true a whole bunch of things that I know aren't true. And that is, for example, that colonialism is a white man thing. It's really not a white man thing, it's a historical thing for the whole of time, and I could play into that idea of decolonization and blah, 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 but I have a much more like realistic, nuanced look of it. I choose not to play into that idea, and that if I wasn't like that thinking for myself, if I were just taking easy choices, I would play into all of those ideas that celebrate me and get me funding and do all of that, but right, yeah. I'm on a real search for truth and for nuance and like not to feed into a certain political fashion.
Okay, so you're not funded, and at the same time you have an interesting way to finance certain things with your projects. You have a non-shop.
Oh, that doesn't fund anything. Also because it's a non-shop. So like the whole point of the non-shop was that it's non-profit,
Right, yeah, but it's just an interesting way. I mean, ideally you get, hopefully somebody buys something from there, but it's
but like...
what is the concept behind it?
It's just a bit of fun, really. It doesn't really go very well. It's not like that's selling, all the time. So, hold on, you got your little bag here, nearby.
Yeah.
So like, I bought this for you today. It's just stuff like that, and like you're paying for the production and the postage of this. So that's why it's not like it doesn't make me any money. Actually, it's a collaboration.
Okay, right.
So because like I don't pay for advertising and all of that, because the algorithms won't support a project like me that doesn't feed into this divisive political landscape. Which, by the way, another reason I'm not playing into that is because I've seen it step by step play out in other countries like Argentina. It is planned. It's not as clumsy as it looks. This division is planned. I've seen it play out in other countries. So I don't want to feed into that of the left and right, or the supposed left and right, because it's not even left and right anymore. Like what what is very left-wing values in the 90s are not left-wing values anymore. So it doesn't even, I can't even pay attention to the definitions. But I've seen, like for example, in Argentina they call it la grieta, which means the crack. And if like I would advise all Westerners that are concerned with the division happening in the West at the moment to study the history of Peronism in Argentina. Peronism in Argentina. Basically it starts with "Don't cry for me, Argentina," that stuff. Yeah, get into that. Anyway, so because I don't want to play into all of that stuff, it's like, okay, I let you do real on the ground dissemination that you pay for. So that's the collaboration. So you know, like
That's a lot of cards.
maybe like you get $20.
You really trust me to go around and give those away.
Well, no, you could leave these in a cafe, for example. So you got me a cafe like this that has a little
Here's
table.
20, here's 20, yeah.
Well, yeah, like a lot of in the UK at least, and well, some other places I've been, you'll have a table that has leaflets on it. So you leave some of these on the table, and that's amazing. That will actually reach someone and change their life.
Bookmarks.
Because if you think that, you know, for some people this is just a cool learning experience. For other people, this is absolutely life changing.
You know how many people I tell about this anyway, actually? It's
Right.
good to have an actual thing. So actually, it's not...
So like you pop that in your wallet,
Yeah.
and when you tell someone, you give them one of these,
Yeah.
or you just leave them somewhere serendipitously, you know. And like I say, for some people it's just a cool learning experience. For other people, you literally change their life because they didn't know they could learn, and they do something like this. And I know that because I get their emails, and this helps you do that.
Postcards.
So, but like I say, I don't really shift many of these.
Yeah.
it's not sustaining the budget in any way. Like I say, it just pays for the postage and packaging.
So-
the postage to the US is like £12, £15. It's a really expensive postage.
Right, so there's no...
There's no profit for me. That's why it's a non-shop.
Yeah, I understand. So first of all, yeah, this is definitely like life-changing.
Look at that. Look at that little
project.
keyring.
Yeah, I might keep that one. So definitely life-changing project, and I do tell people about it. And I think I made this joke that like, oh, you're making me a mule to spread these papers around. But actually, I am kind of doing that anyway now I realize it. So it's fine. But so my question was actually more like the ethos of you choose not to sell. You choose not to sell your courses. You're sort of non-commercial. And at the same time, there's not a lot of funding. Like, how does that all fit together?
There's no funding. Well, that's the thing, man. I live, but I'm not a hypocrite, or I try my best not to be a hypocrite. We all have minds geared at hypocrisy. All of our minds are geared at hypocrisy because society needs contradiction to kind of go under the rug to even function, right? So we all get at hypocrisy. I'm trying really hard not to be a hypocrite, you know? So what was your question? I started to answer it. I
No, it's just the
time.
dynamic of. I think I'm trying to get at this sort of financial or material aspect of it. Like you choose not to charge for anything that you do. You give your courses away for free. There's this non-shop thing where you don't charge for the thing, you just charge for the postage, and you have this sort of non-commercial vibe. And then at the same time, there's also like not funding coming in. I guess like maybe also how do you pay for your life?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like, it's all Patreon. When you donate on Patreon, you don't get anything more. You don't get less ads because there are no ads. There's not like material you access, you know. Oh, right, there's like the interlinear books, which are not my product. That's like just an ebook company that collaborates. So that's just like a freebie. So let's say like for donating, you really don't get any more language transfer material at all. You donate because you want to, because you like the project and all of that stuff, you know. And it means that I don't have to be a hypocrite to get funding, because I would have to be a hypocrite to get funding. You'd have to go against your values. I would have to voice things that do not support the values they pretend to support, you know. So there's a whole lot of hypocrisy and prejudice on the institution of the left, which is in the name of anti-prejudice and all of that, but they're actually doing the opposite. Now I have the nuance to see it. I have the trauma in my own life to see it, that I cannot cause that pain to other people just because it's been caused to me. The majority of what has become the institution of the left is not like that. They're suffering horrifically now for it, and I'm hoping that an air of humility will overcome them now and they'll begin to realize it. Like I went to my old university the other day, they're absolutely broke. They don't know how they're going to survive. I know that this has a massive part to play in it, the weakness of these decisions, the way universities have gone along with this rather than saying, no, actually, we're not implying our inclusive values there if we're allowing you to attack anyone you consider to be right-wing or et cetera, et cetera. Right. Do you know what I mean? There's been a massive amount of weakness and hypocrisy there. And the older I get, the more I realize there are a few people like me in the world that will really stick to the values that they purport for, even when it's uncomfortable for them. And I demonstrate that through my project. And I'm really hoping now that we're at a time that rather than just being this like thing on the edge of the world that I am, that I will get more mainstream, but defining the mainstream now. I think like the mainstream is at this brink where it's realizing, oh my God, we really do need to change. There's so many people that have gone to the right that have defected from the left. The left still has a wild idea of what right means, but mostly it's people that are genuinely liberal that have defected to the right. The extremes of the right and the extremes of the left are the problem, but most people, they're in the middle, and there's a lot of people that identify as right and left, and they actually have exactly the same values. It kind of means nothing anymore. But one thing that I'm sure of is that, you know, civil society has been usurped by an organized force that is making it so that we don't promote the values that we've always purported to. And I feel like one of the last people holding that flag, you know, on a sinking Titanic.
So what would, I mean, if someone heard this and they're like, oh, that sounds like a conspiracy, like what would you say?
I'd say go out into the world and have some experience, and let's talk in 20 years. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Everything you know about history is conspiracy. Conspiracy just means organized lies, people lying together.
Well, let me ask it a different way.
I mean, I've studied in Cuba, I lived in Argentina, I lived in Egypt. I've lived in so many places and had such exposure to different things. You know, I did the occupied buffer zone in Cyprus, where the UN conspired with the illegal police of the pseudo-state of North Cyprus to threaten us. Like, I've been surrounded by conspiracy my whole life. If anyone wants to call me a conspiracy theorist, I just have to say, like, grow up, leave university. You know, that's why I want to go back to university now. Like, I'm trying to wriggle my way back into Essex University. I left that place, even though I got offered a scholarship, free accommodation, everything. I could have lived out my life there, happy as Larry, but I knew it wasn't the real world. I knew that deep down. I didn't even wait for graduation. I finished my last exam and I left, and I went back to Argentina. 20 years later, with this experience of the world, I understand how badly prepared they left me for the world. They sent us out on our year abroad to places like Cuba without giving us the least training psychologically, socially, politically, because it was politically incorrect to talk about Cuba in an honest way in such a left-wing institution. They did young people a massive disservice, and they did a massive abandonment of their duty of care, sending us to places like Venezuela and Cuba without a nuanced outlook on it, just a very heavy left-wing pro-revolution, and then sending young people out there to have like dissociative episodes because they cannot actually understand what they're seeing with their own eyes, because they've been conditioned before seeing it that it couldn't possibly be true what they're seeing. This is a terrible, terrible, weak thing to do. This is not supporting young people. This is sacrificing young people for the fantasy of adults. It's not an adult position to take. So I have a lot of very philosophical and deep thoughts going on about this now, especially that I've come back to the UK in October, you know, to live after many, many years. And walking around the campus, I remembered all of this, and I want to be there preparing young people for the world in a real way. So I'm hoping that now that their funding is drying up and all of that, some humility will seep in, and they'll begin to see all of these terrible, terrible, weak mistakes they've made, and invite people like me to actually bring back to universities what they're supposed to be.
So let me ask you something about that maybe. You mentioned earlier wanting to change the mainstream. And I guess maybe what you're saying now, like interacting more with students and trying to help shape things there, is maybe part of that. Why do you think you would be able to affect the mainstream?
Why do you think I've been able to do language transfer by myself? I'm no ordinary man.
Oh, okay. You're special.
Well, a little bit, yeah. I really realised it. You know what? All I did was make myself more humble and lower myself, because again, that's also part of the cultural thing we come from. And after taking so many hard decisions that no one around me would take, and keep pushing through, I realised I'm not ordinary. I think it's got a lot to do with trauma. I think it's got to do with growing up in a totally despotic environment, which makes me very like hardline on morality and contradictions and bad governance. I'm not ordinary. I really like comparing myself to other people, which I really didn't do for a very long time. I was just interested in what I was doing. I realized I'm not ordinary, and people like me need to be the ones that take over institutions like universities if they're going to survive like anything that they're supposed to have been historically, you know, rather than just centers of indoctrination.
So would you be able to describe a little bit more specifically, like, of course you have your experiences in your history and maybe some of that is very particular to the kind of choices that you've made and the stances that you've taken, but how like in what way does it manifest as someone who's trying to, like, what advantage does it give you, or why would people pay attention to you? Like, could you describe that somehow, or is it just that you are who you are, you know, or is there something more specific?
In what context do you mean? Do you mean in the context of me, like, for example, like taking over the university department, or?
Well, I mean,
In what way?
If it's possible,
Why would people take notice of me? In what way?
This idea of like shifting the mainstream, which is like one of the hugest things a person could dare to do. Like, how does that work? Like, to explain. Like,
Man, people with real values. The world is just full of fake people. That's it. And it's really natural. It's so natural. Like, your brain will take comfortable decisions unless you have. You know, I really like. There's a memory I keep. It's gonna get hardcore now, heavy. But I tend not to have interviews where I don't get heavy, because it's all got something to do with, you know, what led me here. But like, you know, there is a memory that just like, it was so impactful in my life, and that was just like hearing my father go on about his own father and everything he used to do to him, and I thought he was building his way up to an apology, and he wasn't. He said, "Aren't you lucky your dad's not like that? Aren't you lucky you got the best dad in the world?" And I shat myself. I absolutely shat myself, because I was like, oh, I'm going to be like that. I'm going to be like that. I can't forget this. I can't forget this. I can't forget this. Like, my hair stand on end. Genuine real life shit. So the whole way down the line in my life, I've seen people drop off the realness radar, taking easier decisions, and authority, be it cultural authority, educational authority, social authorities, convincing them that their easy decision is right. And I've always seen that hypocrisy. I might have faltered now and then, but I don't usually falter for long before I see through it. So again, with the institution of the left, like attacking, I don't know, for example, like I'm usually in spaces where people are attacking like white straight men. And I'm like, dude, that's not cool. And they deserve it, they've done this, they've done that. I'm like, are you stupid? Are you really that fucking stupid? You know, I came out as gay like when I was 14 years old, 13 actually, still 13. I got beaten the crap out of. I was hearing such evil things about that all the time. Just because I went through that, it doesn't mean I want other people to. I don't want white straight men, teenagers, to hear about themselves what I heard about myself growing up. That doesn't make better people. And if you have to even think about that, you're not really on the left. You're not. You're in an illusion. Like, because that authoritarianism, that getting back, that's not what being a social activist, you know, that's not being a political being. You're still reactionary, you're still lower down there somewhere. You're not actually thinking about governance, society, things that are higher, more above than you, you know? So a lot of people are being so drawn into this authorized prejudice. You know, you're allowed to be prejudiced towards certain groups, men as well. For example, you're allowed to talk all day about toxic masculinity, but women don't have to check anything about what might possibly be toxic femininity. Like, that is actually mad. This isn't ultra-right stuff I'm saying. It's actually just, if you want to create balanced, rational mentalities where people are not running on emotion, thinking they're right because it feels right, with all the danger that's there, you need strong people that have in their life done that to lead the way. And the older I get, the more I realise, COVID helped me realise it as well, I'm in the absolute minority there. So seeing and appreciating now at this age that I'm in the absolute minority there, I'm willing to fight to make myself the head of anything I can, and to share this culture and remind people of what university is supposed to have been about. That they were funded and that they were founded by people like me, or at least I like to believe. Right, so that's what I feel like I need to do. I expect to continue getting rejected. You know, I don't have any delusions, but I'm being faithful to myself. I don't care about how like bots or real people judge me online and come and tell me now, like people come and comment on my videos that I'm a fascist because I've said some things now that sound like stuff that maybe someone on the right would say. I couldn't care less. I'm about being consequential with myself and not betraying myself and not betraying those younger versions of me. Looked at people like my father and said, I'm not going to be that hypocrite. I'm not going to be that hypocrite. And all I see, the more politicized society gets, are people attacking others, considering themselves as the victims, and they can never recognize their violence because they are the eternal victim. It's a very, very dangerous place to be, and it's an amazing thing to do if you want to govern people badly. And if you want to see this play out already, like I say, study Peronism in Argentina. That's just an amazing example, but like you got examples all over the world all over Latin America. The one I know the best is in Argentina because I lived there a long time and you know, suffered there 20 years ago. I'm suffering here now in the West.
You want to run for mayor of the city you're living in? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, I did think. Yeah, I was at some point. Now I'm a bit more open-minded. I might do it, but
a bit more open-minded now, so you're not.
I'm a bit more open-minded to not do it. Like I might do it just as like a stunt. I don't expect to ever win it.
Was it a stunt before?
I was thinking that I might be able to, but then like the more I talk to people, the more I realise just how comfortably brainwashed they are. So I'll give you an example. I went to a little mini festival yesterday, and there was a table there for the Cuban Revolution, right? And I'm just curious, like, out of all of these privileged old biddies that are there with Che Guevara flags, has anyone lived in Cuba? So I went and spoke to them because actually I found it quite annoying because in this context of, you know, social activism being an identity badge, I'm quite annoyed by these people because I lived in Cuba, and whilst I agree that I don't like, they shouldn't have the embargo, I think you're an absolute moron if you're standing there waving the flag of Che Guevara and celebrating the political revolution without knowing the first thing about it. And I was that moron with the Che Guevara flag, but I went there to live, you know, and I have a very different opinion now on the Cuban education system, the Cuban hospital system. Like, I've been in a Cuban hospital, I've received treatment in a Cuban hospital. Oh my God, if you think that that is like the highest level of health in Latin America. Oh my God. I mean, I'm talking about like having to tell the nurse not to cover a wound with a piece of cardboard she found on the side that had blood everywhere. I mean, really. I was telling this lady how I stayed with the head of the CDR, which is the Comité de la Defensa de la Revolución, Committee of the Defense of the Revolution. I stayed with the boss of the Committee of Defense of the Revolution, which is the biggest, like, you know, militant organization for the revolution in Santiago de Cuba, which is the second city of Cuba. And he was explaining to me how, you know, how he loves black people for his country because he wants the best dance and the best song for his country. But when it comes to work, you need a white Galician, you know. And I'm sitting there with also my mixed race friends, and he's like, look, you two, for example, I bet she dances, and I bet he's the intellectual. Like, and these are right. So I'm trying to explain this to these people. And all they're doing is, you know, getting defensive and getting silly and what have you. And I'm just like, look, here's my card, here's my contact. Like, these NGOs also you're collecting money for. I can explain to you how they're wasting and taking it all. If you're interested, if you're genuinely doing this because you care, I'll happily talk to any of you guys anytime. You know, and all they did was got all like uppity, and then, you know, I had people like coming standing around me like if they were gonna have to like move me on physically, and then I went, all I heard is, oh, he's trying to tell me, and I'm just like, what absolute morons. Like, you've got somebody in front of you that studied in Cuba, you've never lived in Cuba, you don't speak Spanish, you don't have the first idea about anything. Or this is a vanity project. You standing here with a Che Guevara flag is a vanity project. And the whole of the left has been taken over by vanity projects. And the fact is that me for saying it, I get called right-wing fascist and all of this stuff, and it's just like, no, that's you. I have all of the power, if I were to want to take it, to step on everybody else and elevate myself. And I've consistently not done that. And I've consistently called people out that have. So universities, especially social science departments, have been very involved in that. It's part of what sent us so unprepared to Latin America for our year abroad. And I'm hoping that they will be humble enough to correct the situation. I've always been critical about universities since I started language transfer. So I'm hoping now to get into one, hopefully my old one, or I'm open. I surprised myself to find myself open-minded to this. Like, mostly it's the nostalgia of having visited my campus and remembering so much of what I went through there. But I'm hoping that they're like getting poor and humble enough now to understand, like, oh, actually, we need to not just put another mask on. Actually, maybe we need to change. This is the kind of person we need to bring into the university to explain us out of our privilege.
I hope that works out the way you think it does. But
I don't think it will. I'm going to give it a try.
Yeah. It sounds like from what you said earlier about colonialism that it's not, it's just a human thing. It's not about a specific kind of person, whatever. So does that mean, anyway, I don't know if that means that you see it as a kind of neutral thing, but what I want to ask is about languages and the fact that the most common languages are these kind of colonial languages because of how colonization happened, and do you find it kind of sad somehow that like it's super interoperable that we can all talk to each other because of, people share so many people have a way to communicate, and at the same time it's a result of this kind of unfortunate history.
Yeah, so my point about that, I'm not saying like colonialism is great or anything like that. And my point is that it's not a white man thing, which is a lot of like what we've been trained to say and repeat, and it's just not the case. I mean, when I went to Latin America, thinking very much about like what the Spanish had done there, because my focus in university was on that. The first thing I learned in Latin America was just like, oh no, this is what they were all doing to each other. People were building islands in the middle of like giant lakes to escape the Incas. The only difference is that the Spanish crossed the sea to do it, So I'm not saying that like colonialism is good. I'm saying it's just like not a white man thing. And when more specifically about your question, I think generally in life, like I'm not one to cry a lot about spilt milk. So, I'm a Cypriot. Don't forget that. I'm a Cypriot. I'm
Cypriot.
From Cyprus. I mean, I'm born here, but my family's from Cyprus. We were a colony until 1960. There's a lot about that I'm deeply unhappy with. Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure you can find videos of me like 15, 20 years ago talking about colonialism as it was just a white thing. Like I was also like to a degree brainwashed in this sense to repeat certain stuff that sounded good. There is a Maronite Arabic of Cyprus, which is the most divergent dialect of Arabic in the world. That's all but lost, actually, because of the Turkish invasion rather than the British colonialism. But that's still colonialism. There's a lot of spilt milk to cry over. But I'm much more like, okay, we are where we are. We're all children of this. We're all children of this situation, And again, to highlight the hypocrisy, it's funny how people seem to have very present the idea that English is a colonial language, but when it comes to Spanish, they forget it. Spanish is all just like tropical,
let's get some
right?
Tacos,
Yeah, but it's like, dude, even Spanish speakers, like in Latin America, like it's especially in Argentina. Again, a lot of people have, been taught to hate and reject English because it's the colonial language, and I'm just like, hello, and I mean, this is a kind of aside, right? But it's interesting to talk about how we can be so manipulated by identities. The amount of like ginger freckled people I've met in Argentina that want to tell me about how they came and colonized us. I'm like, dude, no, you came and colonized. No, I identify with indigenous people. Identify as much as you want, mate. You're ginger and freckled. It was you that came and did the colonizing. It's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing that identity can be warped in such a way. So rather than creating these dissociative situations where people are so scared of being the historic aggressor, they need to talk like we were colonized and Europeans came and colonized us, when you clearly don't have a drop of indigenous blood in you. Rather than being confused by all of that, I think it'd be much better to understand we are where we are. We are the children of this violent world. Let's try and move forward, in a more open, collaborative, realistic way, which neither the right or the left is achieving, because it's based in ideals, especially at the extremes, how things should be, rather than the reality of how things are. Which means many more institutions in our world have a religious nature than those that openly admit it and profess it.
Oh, you want to say that universities are religious?
I would say that a new institution of the left, or if you call it wokeism or whatever you want to call it, is in itself a cult, and it is in itself religious. And that is easily demonstrable by the gross contradictions that you find everywhere. Like in the UK at the moment, I find it hilarious because I've not been here for so long. I'm not actually aware what the correct inclusive terms are. So one of the most hilarious things for me is that, coloured is a bad word and of colour is a good word. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's also massively classist because, unless you're in that class of people, you're not plugged in to be noticing all the time what is the right word and what is the wrong word to use. If you're working class, you're not plugged in to be knowing whether coloured or off-coloured, and the fact that you have those choices between those words and one is bad and the other is good, for me is actually underlying a latent racism that you can't actually face. You know, because if you use a word, you know, so for example in British English at least, Paki is a very bad word. It's a very offensive word. But it's not the word that is offensive. People from Pakistan used to use it all the time when I was a kid. Pakistan actually just means state of the Pakis. It's not a bad word. It was the tone it was used with that was bad.
The intention, yeah.
You. There, I can't even say it because there it sounds bad, but it's not the word. So again, ignorance about language, ignorance about actually what racism is and what prejudice is, has made all of these empty rules that are authoritarian, unnuanced people are then the champions of these rules, and all they are is authoritarian people that relish in destroying people like me. You know, that have real talent, that have worked for it, that are really working from love, that have really had these hard fights with themselves. They can't stand people like me because they're sourcing their sense of power and self-esteem and elevation from this fantasy world that I directly contradict. And that's why I don't get on.
Do you consider yourself an open-minded person?
Clearly.
Are you being sarcastic?
No, why would I be being sarcastic? I mean, the things I'm saying isn't because I'm not open-minded. If I've managed, it's not like this indoctrination hasn't worked on me. It all worked on me. I had to be massively open-minded to realize it was indoctrination, right? So it's not that I'm not open-minded enough that I didn't get inclusivity. Right. I'm open-minded enough to understand this isn't inclusivity. Also, by the way, you know, I grew up in an extremely multicultural place. There were like 6 English white kids out of 30 in my class at school. I know what it's like to live in a real multicultural place where people don't see colour. You see it, but I mean, like, it's not
a topic. Yeah.
It is, but in a fun, playful way. It has nothing to do with who you love and who you bond with and who is your, you know, chosen brother and sisters. Yeah. You know, like, I've lived that. I know what that is like.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Is there something you're close-minded about that you would be able to share?
No, man. I really think I'm such a thinker. And I'll have 5 minds thinking at once. And that's the other thing, you know, like to give you an example, in my personal life, I'm fairly conservative. I want a conservative relationship, I want a monogamous relationship, I don't agree with any of this LGBT culture, over-sexualization, over-fetishization of everything, blah, blah, blah. But politically, I don't think like my preferences should be made law. You understand, I'm a liberal. You do you do what you want. You know, even though my personal values are quite conservative, like I say, I want a monogamous relationship. I want to, you know, kind of like what many people might even call heteronormative. Do you know what I mean? Like Little House on the Prairie kind of stuff. Doesn't mean that like that's going to be what I oblige everyone else to have. It doesn't mean that I don't understand and appreciate that your lifestyle. I don't want to be with someone. I just want to have sex. It's cool. I don't think any of that should be illegal. I don't think any of that has anything to do with the state. You know, I think that's where people that's what I mean, like most people aren't political beings because they can't think like this. And historically, in England at least, no one was a political being. When I was growing up, no one knew what anyone voted for, no one cared what anyone voted for, no one knew who the Prime Minister was even, maybe. People just got on with their lives and had bigger fish to fry. So I think one of the biggest problems in the world is people being told they're political beings when they're really not. And then they're getting indoctrinated to support all kinds of values that they don't understand. Like I say, if you're a political being, you can be like me. You can have some be personally quite conservative, but still have a liberal outlook when it comes to politics because you understand that's what matters, that's what counts politically, and I don't need to make the whole world be like how I am.
Right, yeah.
I think that's really open-minded, no?
I don't want to define it, yeah. I'm just curious how you see yourself, really.
I'm curious how you see me, like the stuff that I'm saying. Because of course, whenever I do an interview, like I'm aware that, you know, whoever comes into language transfer is probably coming from a very left-wing institutionally, because like I say, I identify as being on the left. Institutionally on the left. She might be sitting here going like, oh my God, I had no idea this guy was a fascist. Maybe you think like that. I'm curious.
I've heard you talk about some of these things before, and I can see how the tendencies towards signaling on the left will get people to call you names.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I just see someone who's really reflecting about things and asking questions that are not. You're not allowed to ask those questions because it's taboo or whatever. I mean, I think it's useful to ask the questions and discuss things, and so. But I don't know what it means actually to be open. I'm actually just curious about what it means even. Is
to be open-minded.
I feel like I'm around people that use this term, and maybe I even use this term, and like, but
A lot of people use the term to say you should agree with me. If you don't agree with me, the problem is that you're not open-minded.
Well,
you know. And for me, it's about comfort. Most people will just believe what's comfortable for them. They're not on any real journey for the truth. And again, we live in a really dangerous time because like so many people can make money out of being charismatic and saying their opinions online, but most people are not actually in any real genuine search for the truth. They're searching for comfort. And I'm really well aware of that as well. Also because of like the trauma I've been through, you know, like my mind's always just seeking comfort and stuff, you know, like I need to be so completely aware of everything that my brain is doing. If I didn't break that fourth wall, if I just believed in everything my brain was doing, I would be so totally insane and lost as a person.
So you've chosen to not be comfortable, as you say, and do you think that other people can choose to be comfortable?
I think it's a type of comfort. So comfortable with myself, I need to be comfortable with myself, which means being honest, right? But comfortable in the sense of dumbing yourself down by believing easy stuff, not just parking contradictions that you can't resolve, but rather trying to address them and get to the truth, even if that means, for example, your life is going to become less comfortable, right? So it might mean losing funding. Like I keep saying, man, if I played into all of this stuff, like I wouldn't have any problems with language transfer. Like I wouldn't be fighting to give in the way that I am. You know, it would be much more comfortable.
Fighting to give.
Fighting to give. That has been the story since day one. That everybody, I should be getting like called by universities. They should all be fighting for me to have me there. Of course they should. You know, I think I mentioned this earlier, but like, I'm not sure if I did. But one of the things I mentioned to the teachers when I was at Essex, I'm like, look, everyone graduates with a 2-1 and no one can speak Spanish. That was not a controversial thing for me to say. All of their faces was like, you're telling me. So what situation is that?
Yeah, I hope you advance there, because I mean it is it's transformational.
They have to be ready for me though, which is why I'm not holding back. You know, I'm being very honest about my motivations and how emotional I feel about this and how weak they've been and the mistakes that they've made with the wokeism. To summarize it in a word, I know that offends lots of people, but hopefully you've heard enough about me during this interview to understand that when I talk about wokeism, what I'm actually talking about, you know, clearly not talking about equality, clearly, you know.
It sounds like you're talking about performative culture. You mentioned love a lot in the beginning, and I don't know, do you consider yourself a spiritual person? Like, what does spirituality mean to you?
Yeah, 100%.
You are, yeah. So is it just love? Is it more than that, or is it something metaphysical for you?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I have a lot of thoughts about the nature of life, the possibility of the soul, what the hell we're doing here, blah blah blah. These thoughts, talking about having an open mind, sometimes make me wonder if I'm doing the wrong thing with language transfer. Like, am I actually, you know, am I feeding the beast in a lot of ways? I mean, I could go into that, you know, but you know, I'm open-minded enough that I would allow myself to question that.
If you shouldn't be doing this, I don't know what world we're living in.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. So, like, that's why I decide that I should be, but I'm open-minded enough that I will question, you know, because I have a lot of very deep spiritual questions about what is the best way to participate in life, which is so much illusion. It's always a very complicated thing. So much of it is, you know, even like just being in the fourth wall of believing, not having broken the fourth wall yet, of just believing everything you think and feel is so much of an illusion.
What do you mean by fourth wall?
So you know the term breaking the fourth wall?
From TV where you look at the
100%. So that has got a lot to do with life as well. Learning a language can help you break the fourth wall. And sometimes I wonder, God, is that the right thing to be doing spiritually with people? Maybe this is the wrong thing. I don't know. But when I think we're much more dangerous before we've broken that fourth wall if society is unhealthy. So before you break that fourth wall, you believe in everything you feel. Everything you feel is the truth, right? All your experiences of self is the truth. And you're not very good at stepping out and just seeing it all as a big objective thing, seeing yourself as an objective thing, seeing the contrast between the spirit, so to speak, if that goes in inverted commas, that wants to live, and the body that wants to survive.
If I could just summarize that a little bit, things are what I think they are.
No, what I feel they are.
What I feel.
And then you break the fourth wall, and then you can start thinking about how they are. right? So, to be honest, I don't know if I should give this example. Why not? I was so bullied at school, you know, for like coming out, right? So bullied every day. There was school-wide bullying. There was like 2,000 kids in my school. It was a massive school, and like the whole school, literally the entire school was bullying me. Then people would,
People against you.
yeah, and then people from other schools would come to bully me because it was such a big thing, homosexuality. It was blown up so much in the UK in the 90s, and the fact that like a kid would come out, especially in an area like mine, was just massive. What was the question? Sorry, sometimes I mention this stuff, it makes me a bit dissociative and I just forget what we were talking about.
An example of how breaking the fourth wall and life is
Right, okay. So the thing I'm embarrassed to share, but whatever, is I think like the first time like I just did a psychedelic, a mild one, alright, that I smoked weed, you can bleep that, right? I don't know, whatever. I swear to God, it made me see just how seriously I took every word that was said to me. And I go, oh my God, I wish I had a joint when I was 15. But maybe as an adult, I'm glad I didn't now. But I remember at the time, just like seeing how it helped me break the fourth wall. I would have found so much very funny that I didn't find funny back then. I was really in the first plane of life where every word against me was assaulting my soul, where you know, a psychedelic drug is necessarily dissociative. It takes you out of that. And from that outside place, I could actually just realize how funny it was, and also how much sensitivities I'd been taught, that when people said stuff was gay, they didn't even mean anything about homosexuality.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
all different things that just so much in the first plane of existence, not having broken that fourth wall, I was suffering so much to the point that it was damaging me and I couldn't grow from it. So, not that I'm here promoting psychedelics, because they are a thing that is dodgy to experiment with and can go the wrong way and what have you. But languages do the same thing. Languages help you break that fourth wall. You create an entire new structure to operate in. You learn culture that you didn't learn before, you just acquired before. That helps you break the fourth wall in a massive way. That helps you empathize in a massive way. That helps you not believe that you are correct every time you feel offense or indignation or whatever. It allows you to be more adult, and God, are we missing that? Because if there's something that I see in the West more than ever, is that we are missing adults. We are missing full-grown adults. So many people have been infantilized by this constant brainwashing about who they need to be and the values they need to espouse in order to be loved and accepted by some other authority. It keeps them in an infantilized state, as far as I can see. Yeah. And we've got very few adults left that can actually defend democracy, equality,
Not afraid to admit they're wrong.
Looking to be wrong, searching to be wrong, which is what I'm constantly doing.
To learn and to be corrected, yeah.
I'm always hunting for where I'm wrong. That's not going to lower my self-esteem.
So what's dangerous about, or why should you be so why should you be so careful about teaching languages, because you might help somebody break the fourth wall? Like what's going to happen? Because
these are just my backwards. Like I think very deeply I mean, there's a whole lot of thought that goes on that's not going to affect my decisions in any immediate time, because it's very philosophical thought. So I don't know, anything from looking at the way,
you called it feeding the devil or something.
Feeding the beast. What I'd refer to, one example, right? One example is the way like so many Europeans have done all of this like year abroad stuff, or living some years abroad in another European country, which has a lot of really negative effects. Partly like the way digital nomads strut around cities, not respecting the culture, and they're so used to moving around with a certain sense of entitlement. If they learn the language to really integrate, it's one thing. If they learn the language to show off the 4 words they can say, and turn everything into hipster cafes, then actually, am I feeding the beast?
What?
Or hold on. The other example for me, which is much more important, is that when you go a few years abroad, you're not being politically active in your own country. So that is actually a very interesting way, and it could have been done like this on purpose, to make sure that a whole generation wasn't politically active in their country. Because if you're Greek and you feel a bit more liberal, so you go to Barcelona, you're going to live in Barcelona, you're going to enjoy it, but you're not likely to be politically active. You're going to leave that to the Catalans. And the same all over Europe. Whereas if these people actually stayed more in their countries, they would have been more politically active and possibly not allowed things to go this way. So these are just things in the back of my mind going like, oh shit, I am feeding the beast a little bit, which might, you know, inspire me to do other activities to counter that. It doesn't mean I'm going to pack up language transfer and go, you know. All I was saying with that is like, I am so open-minded. I will have a lot of thoughts that make me uncomfortable. I'm happy to have them. I've been through so much mentally in my own life, like they're not going to keep me awake. These thoughts aren't going to keep me awake at night. You know, I've been through some heavy stuff.
Man, I was really having a moment there when you were talking about the digital nomad, because of course, like I'm this person that travels and I work on a laptop, etc. But I've talked before how I don't really like this term, even though I basically am one of those. Technically, I am a digital nomad.
Yeah.
But,
well, me too.
But the other day, like, you know, 2 people called me that. After I explained to them, like, oh, I'm just visiting London, I'm passing through, I'm often traveling, I'm from Canada, but I haven't really been there in the last 8 years. And they're like, oh, so you're a digital nomad. And then I have to keep trying to explain like why it makes me cringe. And you just described why is there this association between digital nomad and like person who doesn't understand the local culture, person who wants to show off.
Because they're dissociated, mostly they're dissociated people, they're not really present. And I've spent so much time in that stage, I recognize it. And something else I'd say about the institution of the left is that it's amazing of grabbing all traumatized folk and hijacking their minds and the way their minds work. You know, so there's a lot of people that are very dissociative. You know, they're not facing certain things, that have a lot of, that have a lot of unresolved trauma, and the fantasy world of the institution, and the fantasy world of the institution of the left. And I keep coming back to the institution of the left because like people get really stupid and like, oh, you know, Mihalis has gone like ultra right. No, I'm saying the left is not left anymore. Is what I'm saying, right? So this institution of the left, which for me is not left wing, really constructs this fantasy world for people to live in, like these old biddies that are there with the Che Guevara flag. In, you know, and they're privileged people that have grown up in Sussex. Do you know what I mean? Like, actually, are you not thinking how offensive that might be from Cuba for Cuban dissidents that come to the UK and live, and they've got to walk around and see these privileged old ladies with Che Guevara flags when their family have been killed by, oh, you're the inclusive people that think about everyone, but you're not thinking about him, are you? It's this contradiction behind everything, right? And how, like I say, if you're traumatized, you're much more likely to perceive yourself as a perpetual victim and never realize your aggression, your disrespect for other cultures, your imprint as a digital nomad. You're likely to never reflect on all of that. And because I grew up around 2 people, both of my parents, that are constantly focused on their own victimization and actually couldn't notice that they were worse than the individuals that victimized them, you know, really, really shaped the way that I interact with the world and my relationships and everything. Made my life much harder, you know, but I wouldn't change that at all, you know.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I could talk about everything all day. I could talk about everything all day. I'm extremely over-opinionated about everything.
Are you?
That's why I have very few friends. But as I was told fairly recently, I've earned my antlers, and I'm believing it now. You know, I was maybe shy or ashamed to be as opinionated as I am now, and now I'm not. Like, I really recognise how exceptional my drive has been to go and hunt for truth, and how different I am to all the people pretending to be like me, and I'm less ashamed to say it. So deal with it. I don't care if I seem arrogant anymore.
All right. So maybe like last thing, just since we were talking about digital nomads, I heard you're about to live maybe anywhere soon.
Well, I have been kind of. Anyway.
Or moving. You're moving, but you could move.
What
anywhere.
have you heard? Yeah. Well, I'm always like that. I could move anywhere. So, like, basically, in October or November or whatever soon, I'm either going back to Spain, which was my plan. I'd announced that on Patreon, which you would have seen, right? Yeah. And I'm getting to the age where I'm more and more conscious that language transfer dies with me. Well, I don't want it to. I'd love to have a department of people constantly hunting, that see their material as art and also a worker of engineering that are constantly hunting to improve their material, that every teaching session is a test session, that they're always trying to perfect the material, that they're genuinely motivated in that way. Or maybe I just jump around universities and do this. Okay. This is a new idea of mine, so I actually have no idea. I'm trying to like knock on the right doors and get this to happen for this year. If it doesn't happen, I'll go back to Spain for a few months and then see what I do.
Great to chat with you, Mihalis. Thanks for being here.
You too, man.
Appreciate you.